Very good. Thank you for having me. I tried to be in the payments industry about 12 years ago and failed, and now have found myself in a role where I am reapproaching the payments industry. And somebody just asked me outside, so where is your bank based? The tragedy of our company name is that we're neither a bank nor really only about receipts. So the wildly inappropriate name. So who am I? What do I do? So I'm a coder who went into private equity, who then went into product, and now I head up product for Receipt Bank. And Receipt Bank is in the bookkeeping and accounting space. Okay, so if you can imagine people who are trying to produce their accounts, trying to get their VAT back, trying to pay their employees, trying to make sure that that vendor who they're dependent on for supply keeps on supplying them. Well, we deal with all of the paperwork that comes before somebody being paid, or all the paperwork that comes with somebody after they've been paid. And that's sort of the link between the two, because we're one of those fintech companies who might want to avail of all those wonderful APIs that are opening up. Okay? We're a small company. We're about 400 people. We're headquartered in London, and we operate across Canada, the US, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, France, the UK, and a few other countries like that. Okay? Somebody said earlier, you don't want to just follow the letter of the law. You want to go above and beyond that. Well, we use the threat of jail as a very good way to sell our product. It's good to just have the letter of the law on your side. So if you don't do your bookkeeping and accounting correctly, there's a good chance the government are going to guarantee one of two things, sort of death and taxes, and in some states, they might even try to deploy death to make sure that you pay your taxes. So we've got an amazing compliance-led solution. People need to provide documentation. Compliance is a great thing to sell on, but it's not where we want to actually stop. We want to go well beyond compliance. And roughly 1 day in every month is spent doing, and I know that this has been videoed, and I'm not very good at being recorded forever, but 1 day a month is spent doing shite. Stuff that makes you sigh. You go, oh God, I have to do that. And then 2 more days, roughly, I estimate, are spent being annoyed and sighing at the fact that you're going to have to do that 1 day. Okay? So 3 days out of every month are sort of ruined and wasted. Okay? And we want to get rid of those things. So our first aim as a company is to get rid of those sighs. And then we want to add in some smiles. And that kind of comes back to the e-receipting bit of it. How is someone going to sort of add in those smiles? And I said we start off with the threat of jail, compliance. We then move on to saying, surely you want to know what's happening in your business. You want real-time visibility. Lots of people don't want real-time visibility of their business. They want to close their eyes and hope everything's okay. And when you bring real-time visibility, you're actually adding to their stress. Okay? Ideally, you want to bring them beyond visibility and into some form of control. So I actually know when money is going to go out, when money isn't going to go out. And that's the sort of journey Receipt Bank is on, having started with compliance, bringing you into visibility, and then off into control. And that control is where it gets interesting on the APIs that may become available either in the card space or in the payment space. So we can say, that thing you stuck on a spike that's worrying you that you know needs to be done, well, you know what, just press a button and say, pay it when it's due. Not pay it now, not even pay it tomorrow, but pay it when it's due, because we know when it's due. Or, you know what, don't pay it now, ask me later. And come back and say, just keep on asking me later, because I can see my bank balance, I can see how much this is, and I know the two don't fit together. And in an ideal world, I wouldn't just be able to pay it out of the bank for them, I'd be able to pay it off their credit card without delivering them to a website where they have to start typing loads and loads of stuff. You guys would make it easy for me to say, how do you want to pay this? Swipe, pay from my bank, pay from my card. And things are very, very far from being able to do that. You know, it's like the asterisk at the bottom of an Apple thing that says, some sequences may have been shortened. I genuinely want to just swipe and then it's paid. And hopefully we'll find a way to get there. But the reason I joined Receipt Bank was because of SKU data. I joined because I thought no one else has this. And I was around payments for a while, and I thought the most exciting thing in payments was all the stuff around payments. You know, everyone talks about data and the power of data. If you walk into a supermarket and spend £100, your bank knows that, maybe your card provider knows that, anyone connected to open banking now knows that, anyone who runs a general ledger knows that. Everyone knows you spent £100. But if you spent £100 on painkillers or £100 on chocolate cake, you've probably got two very different actions. Okay? One needs to ring the Samaritans, the other is going to go and have a good time. Okay? You cannot do really, really interesting things if you stay at the basket level. Things get incredibly exciting when you go to the SKU level. And we see all of that. So we process, I say we are a small company, but we process about 100 million transactions a year. Okay? So that's, it's not nearly enough for where we want to be, but it's enough. It's enough to see an awful lot of what people do. 40% of that is receipts, stuff that people have already paid for. 60% of that is invoices, stuff people are going to have to go on and pay for. And the dream of getting all of the SKU data in a way you can understand it is that you can give people insights. You can say, last month you spent £8,000. We've done some analysis. Amazon could give you £8,000 for £6,000 instead, because we went through every single line item and found that you could get it cheaper elsewhere. Okay, no small business can afford to do that. No one could take the time to do that. If you have all the SKU data and you've got it well structured, you can do that. The only problem then gets into how do you do that? And this is a kind of question to you guys. If any of you know people who are in that space, do let us know, because when you say I can change your milk for this cheaper milk, you then get into the question of, is full-fat milk the same as 2% milk? Is Cravendale milk the same as Avonmore milk? Very local examples here. But anyway, is almond milk the same as oat milk? Milk is not milk, except to some people it just is milk. And they're like, just get to me cheaper. Other people are, no, I specifically wanted the cold filtered milk. And that gets really, really hard to do. So we've discovered that moving into this space where you're looking at the SKU data, the easiest problem to solve is almost getting hold of that data. The hardest thing then is actually disambiguating it and coming up with equivalents so you can give people back cost savings ideas. But there is a big, big problem in the way of all that, which is most things aren't operating via APIs. Most things aren't operating electronically. Most people stuff receipts into their pockets, into their wallets, into the glove compartment of their utility vehicle. And then they go around towards the end of the quarter, or worse still, towards the end of the year, and they pick up all those bits of paper. They dry some of them out maybe, and they put them into a bag. And then they drive to their bookkeeper, and they act surprised that it's only 2 days before the tax deadline, and they hand over the bag, and then they run away. And at that point in time, telling somebody, oh, here's some amazing insight about what you've just purchased, is completely and utterly irrelevant. The bookkeeper has no time to do anything interesting because they're up against a deadline with just bags of receipts in front of them. And the transaction happened 9 months ago. I can't get the invoice and say, swipe right to pay this. It got paid 8 months ago. Okay? So we have a very big challenge that the vast majority of people who are engaged in this stuff aren't new startups, aren't super funky people who are involved in super funky ways of doing things. They're just ordinary people who are still operating off paper, off bags of paper. And what we would love to see the industry come up with is a way that that wasn't the case, that you could bring us to a point where we did actually get e-receipts, where we did actually get e-invoices in, where we could take the running of a small business to more real-time processes. So you would go from people reporting paper 9 months after the fact through to giving them visibility in real time of what's actually happening, through to control. And if you do that correctly, we could probably migrate things that go through on electronic fund transfers across to card spend, because the user experience is going to be just as easy. for somebody who's juggling their money to be able to dip into their card facility versus their own bank account could be very appealing. For us to do that now, standing as a fintech who's trying to solve how do you read 100 million receipts, that's my primary challenge. We've got people who are developing machine learning to do that so that people aren't involved. And to do 100 million receipts, that might be the equivalent of 500,000 different document formats. It is a massive long tail. It's not a case of just 100 merchants that do it all. Huge, huge long tail. That's my primary challenge. And we're facing off into, in a way, your industry, trying to figure out how to make a pay button so that you can easily do that. And that's not easy at all. At the moment, screen scraping is about to be shut down. This is really interesting for us as we watch, is that provider still going to be able to give us a bank feed? When we go out and try to initiate a payment, that is by no means simple. And then when we look into the card space and say, how do I get in an e-invoice and simply pay it with a card in a single swipe? That's not easy to do either. We would really, really like to see that happen. And I'm very interested in finding out from you guys afterwards how that will be done in question time. Going back to the e-receipts bit, there's no point getting all of that data if you're not trusted to use the data. Or if, in order to become a holder of that data, you had to swear blind you wouldn't do anything with it. And a lot of the e-receipt solutions that we see coming out aren't actually putting the data into a space where it can be used for the benefit of the customer. It's sort of locked off. It's inside an app and therefore can't easily get through to an accounting system. It's inside an app and has sworn that it will never do anything to prejudice the merchant from whom the receipt came. We definitively want to do things that are loyal to the customer, loyal to the SMB who's spending. We want to show them things like this. This is a real example. So we process 100 million transactions roughly. Tens of billions go through the system on a weekly basis. We get access to stuff like this. We can say, look, you purchased a 10 millimeter by 100 millimeter barrier pipe coil. And that's probably the simplification of what it was, okay? When we go back to almond milk, chocolate milk with half latte, then it's very hard to figure out what those things are. But we can then say to them, you spent here, we can do a market comparison against everything else, and you can take one of two actions. You can feel good about yourself, you're not being completely stupid, you know, and if you like city plumbing, stay with them. But if you are interested in going cheaper, you can go cheaper. We want to do this for millions of SMBs around the world so that they basically get the power of a procurement department working for them. You get that if you're in a large company. You don't get that if you're in a small company. We do not need e-receipting to do this. None of this happened off e-receipts. It did not require structured data in an XML format. It did not require some global standard. But it would be lovely if there was e-receipting, if it did come through in a structured format, if there was a global standard. Or even at its simplest, when someone went in to buy 100 meters of barrier coil, that's quite large, probably, it would be my guess. And if they paid by card and they loaded it up, I don't want them to have to reach across to grab a bit of paper. I want, ideally, the whole card industry to say, don't worry, we will connect the piece of paper through to that person just based on the card. We'll link the two together seamlessly. So they can just walk out saying, I know I paid on my card, therefore I know it will be in my accounting system. I know it will feature in a report like this, where I will see, should I continue to shop at Travis Perkins, or should I switch to City Plumbing? And that's really where we would like to bring things to. It happens at the moment to a certain extent, but generally where the merchant and the customer know each other very well. And lots and lots to spend isn't where the merchant and the customer know each other very well. The hotel I've just stayed at, does it know me? I don't particularly want them to know me. I probably won't go back to it either. This was full. Much nicer hotel. So I had to get paper. Interestingly, the payment didn't go through correctly, and then people are now back at the office figuring it out. So it's a real learning on how payments sometimes don't work. But we want to produce this, and we would like to see this happening routinely for about the 800 million small businesses that exist around the world. And if the industry could come forward and give e-receipts, that would help towards this. The next big thing I'd say, because I'd be sort of remiss if I didn't do a bit of what Receipt Bank is good at. We're very good at distribution. We sell to bookkeepers and accountants bring us to their small businesses. That way we've got good reach. We deal with about 8,000 bookkeepers and accountants, and they've brought us through to, so far, 250,000 small businesses. In about 18 months' time, that'll be about 1 million small businesses. And after that, that'll hopefully continue to rise. Many of the e-receipting solutions suffer from getting going, from getting people to adopt, getting a merchant to come on board, getting a bank to come on board, getting consumers to come on board and go through. What Receipt Bank has done is basically short-circuited that and just started off with the paper, the emails, and the electronic copies, and solving the problem today for the way things are today. But are very ready and able to adopt whenever e-receipting does actually finally arrive, whenever e-invoicing does actually finally arrive. And I think I was talking to somebody earlier today and saying in Italy, e-invoicing is coming in very strongly. I'd hope that some other country may be able to push out e-receipting as strongly too.